It's Amazon's turn at the top. The company is now the world's most valuable public company, worth over $1 trillion Australian dollars. Amazon has toppled Microsoft and now sits well clear of Apple and Google parent Alphabet.
We've seen Australians constantly use Microsoft, we all use Apple, Google. We couldn't avoid them if we tried. Our experience of Amazon has so far, though, been pretty different from those in the US. For tonight's Taking Stock, we're joined by Margie Osman, CEO of Tourism and Transport Forum, and Phil Baker, former Associate Editor at the Australian Financial Review. Phil and Margie, thank you very much. Great to see you guys. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, you see that Amazon is the most valuable company in the world, and Chris and I are saying, but we don't even use Amazon,
exactly.
Right? It seems like we're so in contrast to what's happening in America. Why do you think we still got this kind of jarring experience of not really using Amazon?
I think, you know, your average online shopper is using Amazon a great deal, and Amazon now have a presence here in Australia, so I'd be watching this space. I think the whole issue about them being the most important company in the world, I mean, all three of those guys at the top have been jockeying backwards and forwards.
Check which day.
Yeah, check which day of the week it is. And I think given the amount of money that Apple are pouring into R&D for things like personal health devices and all of the next gadgets of the future, I think it's going to be too long before Apple's back up the top.
Yeah. I suppose the thing is, though, if you look at the New York experience, Phil, you can hit a button and all of a sudden laundry detergent will be at your front door in 20 minutes. I mean, that's pretty different. And when you think about that, I think, sure, most valuable company in the world, that is an incredible achievement. But we're pretty different here with our experience, right?
Well, as a country, we're spread out too. Sort of Melbourne and Sydney are the two big centres, you know, roughly around about 5 million each. So in New York, where there's how many people, it's pretty easy to sort of drop that laundry off at the doorstep. Where here it's a little bit tougher. But I still think actually the hype when Amazon, you know, in the lead up to the launch was incredible. So for it to have matched that hype would have been sort of an achievement to start with. But also, look, Amazon are going to sort of keep growing. That's why they're sort of back on the top of the market. It's worthwhile saying that $1 trillion Australian dollars, just to give you an idea, BHP is, what, 170 billion? CBA, some of our biggest companies, 128 billion. So it is actually in our whole share market, I think, is what, $1.5 trillion? So you know, that's a pretty big company, and I know, and as Margie said,
they can drop the value of a BHP in like a day in a bad share market, right?
Absolutely.
Bottom line here is it's slightly sad, Chris, that you'd be ordering washing detergent.
I know, with all of this cool stuff.
It's very sad. He's a very interesting guy. He really is.
I promise. No.
But, you know, the other thing I think is to think technology, because a lot of Amazon's future will be built around drone technology. Australians are the early adopters in this space.
And there's a Canberra suburb where they're testing these drone deliveries. I mean, it's very divided, that whole debate.
It has,
there,
but most of the state governments are now looking at memorandums of understanding for use of drones for all sorts of things. So I think...
It's funny because I don't think I like the idea of the drones. I was reading about this Canberra suburb where they're trialling them, the noise of them, they're whizzing past, people get things dropped on their, you know, on their doorstep. It's not even for them. Yes.
At their garage, Brooke. That's the latest one, Chris. That's the sort of new innovation in the US, is that Amazon will drop off your packet of laundry detergent.
I need it.
At your garage. At your, I don't know, if you haven't got a car, I haven't got a garage, I don't know what they'll do. But the drones will sort of drop it off anywhere you like, even at someone else's house. Or another at a post office, or another shop that you might walk past on the way home, if you haven't got a car or a garage, and you can sort of pick up your laundry detergent there.
It's going to be the Uber Eats solution. It'll come by drone.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, obviously, the laundry detergent for me is very front of mind. Like, I have to stop off on the way home.
I think you're a very sensitive new age guy, Chris. It's most impressive.
It did make me wonder when you consider like the lag effect of what we're discussing in the US, which is happening right now, and what our experience is. Have we still got this issue when it comes to business more broadly of the tyranny of distance? Do we still talk about that, or is that over? Is that an old discussion?
I think it's a bit of an old discussion. I think sort of retailers around the world, I think I said this before, that looked down at Australia and they used to call it Treasure Island because our margins were so big. So I think, you know, that tyranny of distance, I think actually other sort of retailers doing a good job as well. I don't know, our retailer of choice in our household seems to be Iconic with their return policy. And so what Amazon does is actually create more competition. So actually all consumers are going to win out of this. And if you want to follow the money, Brooke, it's interesting to note that on the share market, the most shorted stock is JB Hi-Fi. And that's really all that to do with Amazon. That eventually fund managers, the professional money, are saying, we're betting that JB Hi-Fi will struggle because Amazon eventually is going to win.
Yeah, and it took the government here a while to figure out that they needed to make new rules so they could collect GST off all these goods that were coming in from overseas to try and level the playing field a bit for the locals. So
Yeah, that was a big story, wasn't it? Okay. Moving on to another big story that we've read about today. Australians, apparently, are more likely to get divorced this year than to change banks. It's an amazing thing to say, but apparently it's true. Our banks are, by some measures, the most profitable in the world. So the question then becomes, is that because changing banks is so hard that real competition is very, very hard to achieve in Australia? So interesting way into this conversation about banking with regard to divorce, but still, the question remains about, whether it is simply just too difficult and we just don't need to bother changing banks. Margie, what do you think?
I don't think it's just banks. I think it's if you wanted to change your superannuation provider, you want to change your power provider.
The health insurance.
Your health insurance.
On that one.
Or as I unfortunately spent 2.5 hours with a telecom which shall remain nameless today, simply to upgrade my cable. So, look, I don't think it's just the banks. I think if you actually took it a step further, I think we'd be more likely to get divorced than change any of those things, because people's eyes glaze over. It takes too much time. And look, that might make me lazy, but I must confess,
I think
I'm just staying where I am.
I think people relate.
I think consumers actually have to take a bit of the blame here.
Yeah.
Are we lazy?
I'm lazy.
Are we lazy?
Yeah.
It's a bit like the old sort of gag in the superannuation industry. They always say Australians take more time over their footy tips than they do about their sort of superannuation. And I think sort of banking and changing, banks is sort of almost in that same sort of bucket. We always complain, we always whinge, but actually at the end of the day, do we actually fill out the form or do we actually make a phone call to sort of try and change our bank? We don't.
Yeah.
And those in the banking industry, they call it sticky money because they know it's going to stick because, you know what, I'm busy, had a terrible day at work, kids are playing sport on Saturday, big game.
No time.
And no time.
Plus, I've got to get my footy tips.
Got to get the footy tips.
Got to get there. That's important.
Busy.
And spend more time shopping online.
And spend more time shopping online. So I haven't got time to change my bank account, Chris.
It's such a good point. But, we do hear this about various different areas of the business world that we find ourselves in. Margie, you mentioned insurance before and telco. So it's across all of these different things. You might have 10 areas in which you pay regular money to be a part of, and we get the same advice across all of them, which is get on the phone and hassle them and get a better deal. But, what do you allocate one day a month where you just call them one after the other? It's hard, isn't it?
Well, we're too shy too, I think.
Yeah.
People sort of don't like asking for a pay rise. They don't like asking, actually, I want to get my money back. We're just a bit shy like that, and business takes advantage of that. Yeah. So with open banking, the new rules, and also with technology...
what that is.
Well, open banking is...
quite aware of what's about to happen.
If open banking is also, take the 4 major banks, maybe they will now start to actually share information about their clients. So everyone will know everything. So everyone will know about your sort of credit history. Everyone will know how much money you've got in the bank. You've been spending too much. Everyone will know about your fetish for sort of laundry detergent and your washing machines and so forth. Because of technology. And so all of a sudden, in theory, this open banking, know your client. You'll be able to sort of open up an account like that. It'll be very easy. You've got banks, sort of a neo-bank.
So you reckon finally that, our time has come as consumers, it's going to all be a bit easier?
Well, technology says these neo-banks that are on your mobile phone. So you don't even go to a branch, you don't even actually log onto your computer. You can get a home loan in 20 minutes. You can sort of, log in and get sort of an approval loan in 60 seconds because they've got the technology, the credit sort of check on you to do it like that. So in theory, Brooke, it's never been, or it's never going to be, once I think that July 1 these rules come in, it's never going to be as easy to change. So after July 1, there really should be no excuse. There should be no whinging. Because
I feel like we all know the way it's going to go.
Margie doesn't agree.
No, I'm not disagreeing. I will say this. In my experience, when I went in and said, this is not a great interest rate and I'd like you to fix it, they did.
Yeah, they do.
So, it is a case of asking.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that it's the wealth of paperwork and it's the endless pages of terms and conditions that legislation now requires you to be completely across before you sign your soul away. And I think for many people it's both an eye-glazing and a forget-it experience.
One final topic with you guys tonight, which is, well, at first glance it seems kind of a difficult one to address, fat shaming, okay? Apparently now it is officially grounds for sacking. This became quite a serious case. The Fair Work Commission found that an employee who had suggested that her supervisor couldn't feel the cold in the office because she had extra padding was not unfairly dismissed. I mean, instantly you say, well, of course you can't fat shame someone, but then when you kind of read the details of the case, it seems like there's a bit of office banter. I don't know. Have we gone too serious? Do you understand? I mean, was she being a jerk, but should she be sacked?
I think we're only getting half the story. I think there may be a lot more in the exercise, without commenting on this particular case, of course. But in my experience with these things, what quite often happens, if you're a jerk once, you've probably been a jerk lots of times. So I would work on the principle that this is well, in these circumstances, quite often, an employee might be making everybody else's life difficult on a regular basis and be on a couple of warnings. I find it hard to believe this would be the only reason that somebody's employment would be terminated and that it would be supported by the Fair Work Commission. I think there's a bit more of a story to tell on this one.
Well, I think the report did say that she had actually also been sort of writing a few nasty comments on Facebook because she said it was after hours. That had nothing to do with work. So call me old-fashioned, Brooke, but calling your boss fat, not a great career move, I don't think.
No,
and I think it is a sackable offence. I think actually that is just, that's a no-brainer. That's it.
But like if I say, well, you've got grey hair, I mean, you know, is that bad?
No, I think no.
I think where, you know, where do you draw the line? Like, well, a suit like that, Phil, you know.
Well, actually, grey hair's okay with my suit.
Well, sometimes it's just, it's hard to know where to draw the line. And like whether you're talking inside work, outside work, I mean, that's all blurred now, as you said.
Yeah.
Out of hours, is that fine? You know, on the way home, on the train, is that work time? I mean,
it's all about culture. It can't possibly be about individual circumstances. It's about the culture you set within the company that says these are the sorts of acceptable ways we think you should deal with each other as colleagues, and this is the sort of environment that we want to have in our workplace. So, you know, I think that's what determines these sorts of things. And if somebody is consistently not conforming with the culture, well then, it is a sackable.
I think the defence that was put by the person who said it was that, you know, I was genuinely saying that perhaps you can't feel the cold because there's a bit of extra padding there. So she was saying, no, this is not sass, exactly. So this is digging. But I suppose the point remains that you do have to be pretty careful about what you say. And if you look at this issue in isolation, you look at what was happening before that comment happened and what happened after. After, somebody just feels really bad about themselves. Nothing good has happened, right? So, yeah, sure, that's terrible. That's not the way to go, is it?
No. And I won't be talking badly about you with your laundry.
You can, it's okay. But, you know, just not to the boss, maybe.
Yeah, that detergent fixation is going to stay with us.
God, he never stops talking about detergent, this guy. Thank you so much, Phil Baker, Margaret Osmond. Thank you. Great to have you on Taking Stock.